So these are notes on how to make a graph in Excel if you have Excel 2016. If you have Word 2016, making a chart is actually the same as it's always been, so you can just go ahead and use those notes. The first thing you want to do is enter in your data. And just know that Excel is really a data analysis program. It's not made for making data tables, and so that you really want to do in Word. So all you really want to enter into Excel is your manipulated variable or independent variable data and your dependent variable data. So I'm going to kind of make up some data here. So I'm going to say moisture level and pH level. And let me, actually, no, I'm going to change this a little to show you. I'm going to say percent, we're going to say percent density. All right, and there we go. So now I'm going to enter in my percents, and I'm going to say I had a 0% and a 25% and a 50% and a 75%. I took a lot of data, and 100%. Notice I'm not putting in any percent signs. In Excel, you never want to put in units. Units start to confuse it. So we'll add units later, but for entering your data, don't enter in any units. So then we're going to put in our pH level. So we'll say 7.6. All right, so now we've got all of our data entered. And now we're going to highlight it. So starting at this cell here, I'm going to draw a box around the data. Now this never gets highlighted for some reason. It's a weird Excel quirk, but you can see the thick green line going around means it is highlighted. So now we're going to insert our graph. So we go up here to insert, and then here are the different graphs. Now they call them charts, they're really graphs. And I know based on my data that I want what we would call a line graph, but what Excel calls a scatter graph. So not this graph here, but this graph here. And so I'm going to take this one that doesn't have a line in it. And so now I have my graph. So now I need to change and add some things about my graph. So over here, this says add chart elements, and I can add some axis titles. So if I want to add a primary axis title, I can now go ahead and type that in. So this is percent density, and that comes in there. And I don't need to make the percent sign, even though that's technically the unit, because it says percent density. So then I'm going to go here again, and I'm going to say axis titles, and I want a vertical axis, and I'm going to say pH level, and hit enter. So what you're not seeing me doing is I'm hitting enter, and then that goes in. So now I want to change my title, because this title matches my responding variable, but it doesn't really explain my graph. So I can double click there and just highlight it. I could also have gone to add chart element. I'll show you that in a second. And one of the, so here, if I go here, you'll see this gives me an option for chart title. And it says, do I want it above? Do I want it center overlaid? Do I want none? So I'm going to enter in a chart title. Okay, so now I've got a much more informative title. So I can get out of that so that I have more room. So now I want to do a couple of things. The first thing is anytime I have a scatter plot, I want to add in a trend line. So I'm going to show you that. And then the second thing is, notice here that my scale is only going from 7.4 to 8.2. Excel often graphs your data to maximize difference. And so looking at this, it appears that there's some huge swings in the data. But then what we're going to do is we're going to change the axis here so that it's more reflective of the pH scale. So first, let's put in a trend line. So you add a trend line the same way you always have added a trend line. So you pick one point and you click on it, and then you do a right click. And then you can go down to add trend line. And basically, unless you know that, so you'll notice a bunch of different options pop up. Unless you know that the data should be exponential or logarithmic, or it's really clear that it is, just go with linear. There will be some times this year when you get exponential or logarithmic data, and in that case use it by all means. But if you don't know, then go with linear. They also have added this thing called moving average, which kind of gives you a trend line based on if your data seems all over the place. Okay, so in this case, I might pick moving average just because it does seem to go up sharply and then it comes down sharply, but it's still giving me a trend line. I will say that the one thing that moving average doesn't let you do is it doesn't let you forecast forwards or backwards. So I'm just going to show you what that does. So if I hit linear, I get this. But then let's say I want to go forwards, let's say 20 periods. Okay, so I put in 20 and I say enter, and that forecasts my trend line forward to 120. So that's a really good way to extrapolate data forwards or backwards if you had something that is not 0. I'm going to take that out here and I'm going to go back to moving average, and I think that's fine. So now I've got my trend line. I can click out of that. So now I want to deal with my axis here. So I'm going to go back over to add chart element, and I'm going to deal with the axes. And I'm going to say I want more axis options. And on my axis options, I want to look at the vertical axis. Okay, so now here I'm going to go to, I want the vertical value axis. So I clicked right here, and I'm going to go down. And notice it's saying minimum is 7.4 and maximum is 8.2. Now, you need to make some sort of a judgment call, right? If you're doing percent, you go 0 to 100. With pH, I'm going to go 0 to 14 because that's the pH scale. So I'm going to highlight that and type in 0. And then I'm going to highlight this and type in 14. And say enter. If I were doing something else, I might need to kind of figure out what I want to make my bounds, but either way, remember that Excel is going to maximize difference. So it may appear that there's a difference there that isn't actually there. Now it's interesting, if you know about pH, pH is actually a logarithmic scale. And so they've put in this new logarithmic scale, you could click on this and it gives you that, which is kind of cool, but we're not going to do that this time because that gets into more pH knowledge than a lot of us have, and that's not what this is about. So now when I look at, so now I can X out of this. When I look at my graph, I see this really is not the steep, sharp upswing that I saw and then a big downswing once I make my scale reflective of the pH scale. And so this gives me a much better sense now that really there isn't an effect of plant density on pH level of soil. But this also shows you, my main goal in this is to show you how to add a trend line, how to add axis labels, how to change the axis, how to manipulate your title. And then obviously if you were doing a bar graph, as far as the titles and axis labels, all of that is still the same. You would just use a bar graph. Just to know, when we're looking at bar graphs, again, weird thing of Excel, you want to make sure you're doing the column graph. And so if you click here, it gives you, it'll say bar is this way. You want the column up here. We don't actually want a column though. So please, if you have questions, let me know so I can help you out. I don't tend to look at the comments on these videos, so please don't comment because I might not see it. Have a good day.